Hello, and welcome to the UnToxic Boss podcast, where leadership meets empathy and productivity meets compassion. I am your host, Jeannine K. Brown, and each week we will dive into the world of effective leadership without toxicity. I'm here to help equip you with the tools, insights, and stories to transform your leadership style, foster a healthy work environment, and create a space where everyone feels valued and heard. So grab your notebook, get comfortable, and learn to stop being a jerk at work. Welcome to the UnToxic Boss. Welcome to the first episode of the UnToxic Boss. I am so excited to be here and to be with you today and to talk about psychological safety. So over the last year, I've been on the road doing keynote speeches and working with organizations in their offices on the topic of psychological safety and its impact on creating a more inclusive environment. And also the results of a more inclusive environment is a high-performing team. And so that is where this series is coming from. I realized that I can't touch every company as much as I want to. I would love to be able to provide all these services to you and your employers all over the world. And that is our goal, is to be able to touch everyone. And one of the ways that we want to be able to do this is start having more intentional conversations around the topic of psychological safety and also how to be an untoxic boss is to do this with you every Friday. And so the reason I'm going live first is one, so you can see my face. Two is one, I want to lay a foundation about what psychological safety is, the impact of workplace trauma, and how to untoxify your leadership style. And I'm going to be making up some words, and hopefully one day I'm going to be in, I guess, what Webster or all the dictionaries with this untoxic boss term. So we're out here creating our own lingo as we talk about this topic. But I wanted to do the live first, not just because I want you to just hear my voice. I am serious about creating and having a foundation for this topic. I wanted to be able to keep this material for you, and I want you to be able to share it. So please like, share, and invite people. So before we get into all the things related to being an untoxic boss, who the heck am I, right? So let me talk a little bit about who I am, my background, and why I think I can lead this conversation. So first, I'm Jeannine Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Everyday Lead. We are a consulting firm based in Atlanta, serving clients all over the globe with domestic operations in the US and an international and global reach. We focus on helping companies retain talent, right? That's our specialty. Is we believe both for the companies that you can keep high performing and high potential talent in the workplace. And we also tell our coaching clients, you don't have to leave your company. You don't have to jump ship, run down the street, go to the competitor to have a fulfilling career. It's just a few things that you might need to do to help you. And so our goal is to continue to help companies retain talent from the intern to retirement who love what they do and the companies that they work for. I am passionate about that. And part of that actually comes from my background. I think as we'll talk over the next several weeks and months, is you'll learn a little bit about my story. But I think I had a pretty great corporate career. I do believe that there was one company that I worked for that I left too soon. And I left without enough conversation about the possibilities and and my particular future at the company. And so I know that it is possible to say at your employer. But I also know that we got some bad actors in companies, and we want to make sure that we help them untoxify their leadership style so that we can retain talent. My background is actually, I'm an accountant by trade. I went to school at Alabama State where I earned my bachelor's degree in business administration with a focus in accounting. I have a master's of business administration from Georgia State University, where I was in one of their executive MBA programs. And over the last 20 years, I have been a hiring manager, both on the corporate side as well as a business owner. I love people. I love working with people. I actually love helping people see their potential and the ability that they have right? Helping them identify their talents and showing them where their superpowers lie so that they can have more confidence and do great work. And I believe that leaders are in the business of making geniuses and making people smarter. And that's why this topic is so important for me. I've worked in state government. I've worked in Big Four public accounting at Deloitte, and I've been a tax director in the industry. So I've done all sorts of things with the cerebral side. And this time I get to bring the cerebral and the heart work that I love to Everyday Lead, and where we help companies and we work with their talent, and we provide workshops, executive coaching, and strategies through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, welcome to this first episode of the UnToxic Boss series. Today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive into the essence of psychological safety in the workforce, where you place your trust and openness and collaboration can thrive. I believe, every individual can feel valued and heard at work. And whether you're an experienced leader or you're just stepping into leadership, or you have aspirations to lead people, this episode is going to be key to helping you unlock the secrets of creating an environment that fosters psychological safety through the lens of inclusion. And I believe that high-performing teams must be diverse, right? All sorts of backgrounds, experiences, and expertise. And some of that is visible and some of that is unseen. I think high-performing teams must be inclusive, and they also must be free from bias, right? So we keep all that personal foolishness that our brain informs us, because if we have a brain, we do have biases. But we try to free ourselves and our teams from some of those ideologies and biases that don't serve us well, right? Those negative biases. And the team must be psychologically safe. So again, a high-performing team must be diverse, inclusive, free from bias, and psychologically safe. And whose responsibility is it to create a psychologically safe culture or workplace? That's the question, right? Whose responsibility is it to create that? And I want to say it's yours. It's mine. It's all of our responsibility to create a high-performing workplace, a culture and a team that is psychologically safe. It's all of our responsibility to do that. And so why this topic, and why now in this culture? Because if you pull out your phone, one thing that you can do is go to I didn't want to say Google, but go to Google or whatever browser you use to search, Safari, Google, Bing, whatever is out there that you feel comfortable with. And I want you to type in this phrase: my boss is. What's one of the first 2 or 3 words that comes up when you type that in? I know what the word is. And this is why this is important to me. I have been very fortunate for the majority of my career, when I was working in corporate and working in public accounting, to have some great leaders. And I attribute a lot of my success to the fact that I had leaders who allowed me to be my full self at work. And that's both the girl who loves 80s and 90s hip hop, gospel music, but also who's a nerd and very cerebral and wants to get into all the intellectual conversations. And also sometimes the lazy girl who just want to hang out at the beach and have a good time. I get to bring all of her to work. And I know that a lot of us don't feel safe in our work environments. We have workplace traumas that we are dealing with, where we feel that we've been betrayed, undermined, belittled in the workplace, embarrassed, don't feel safe asking questions, making mistakes. And it's interesting because we go into other professions and allow them to practice on us, right? Doctors, attorneys, but we have to come to work as, a tax executive or the HR manager and be perfect and not make mistakes. And we brought that into the workplace. And so as you saw when you did the browser search on the phrase, my boss is, why this topic is so important. And I always want to root this in some data, because remember, I said this is just the beginning of this series. But, most American workers view their bosses as toxic. And that's why that word comes up in our browser, because they're out on in their browsers trying to find solutions for dealing with the toxicity of their leadership. And Gallup does a survey every year. It's called The State of the American Manager. And it's a report that comes out. And according to their studies, 50% of Americans have left a job at some point in their lives because of a manager, to get away from their manager or leader, or to improve their overall life and lifestyle. So we find that these surveys tell us that people aren't leaving their jobs because they don't like the company or they don't like their profession itself. They don't like us. They don't like you. They don't like the managers that they're working for. And so we got to figure out, how can we retain talent by creating people to be the best people leaders that they can be, right? Becoming a leader worth following. And that means, and the interesting thing about becoming a leader worth following, I know several people, and it happened to me when I left Deloitte. I went to another organization, and I actually started recruiting people from my former employers. And that's when I realized, becoming a leader worth following may also mean someone will leave their company to come work with me, because the experience of working with me as a leader has been so fulfilling for them that they're willing to trust me, take a leap, and go somewhere else with me or because of me. And you can't do that if you're a toxic leader. You will never have that experience of people saying that you are the person they want to work with and work for if you are a toxic leader. So how many of you in the chat have considered or left a role to go work for someone else, or may have been that leader where people would leave, even if it was an internal department within your company, or have people who always want to work on your engagements? If you're in a consulting firm, like they're always with their hand up ready, like, hey, whatever your next project is, I want to come work for you. And if you're that kind of leader, then you're going to love this topic on psychological safety, right? Because what we're going to do is give you some tips and ideas to enhance that. If you haven't had that experience as a leader, or you've been a part of a 360 feedback, or you may have gotten some feedback and it was like people aren't comfortable, they feel intimidated by you, or any sort of language like that, we want to give you tips and ideas that's going to help you enhance your leadership style so that you are more of that leader worth following. So what are toxic traits? Okay, we're saying our boss is toxic, and I've heard this when we do this workshop for companies. I've heard partners and senior leaders and CEOs, chiefs tell me, this workforce is soft. They just, they're soft, and that's the problem. And I'm going to say that is not the problem. I think we're in a culture now where we find that it's more of a social culture, work culture, right? When people are looking for companies they want to work for, they want them to specifically align with their core values, but not just their core values, their lifestyle, right? How I want to be treated at work, the social aspect, right? I'm not working to live. I'm not living to work. I'm working so that I can live the kind of life that I want. And I'm going to go from company to company until I find that. And we don't want to do that because we know how much it costs to train people. And so when we talk about what are some of the common traits that employees tend to associate with a toxic boss, they include micromanagement. And I think excessive micromanaging, right? You got to check in at every single moment about every single thing that you're doing, or they don't take their hands off the wheel and just give you the task. They want the task done specifically and exactly the way they would do it, right? That's what micromanaging is, right? You don't allow your staff or your employees to have freedom to be creative, freedom to design or impact a process. So those sorts of things. You're inconsistent, right? How you manage is inconsistent. How you lead your team, you might have favoritisms, right? That could be inconsistent. So I treat Shakira a particular kind of way because we went to the same college, or we're from the same country, or we might, have very similar interests. So, I give her some breaks where, I treat, Kim a totally different way, right? I'm stricter on her. And, I'm tougher on her in my feedback and evaluation, right? So I'm showing unequal favoritism, uh, lack of clear communication. That is probably one of the things I hear the most. Like, people are unsure about what you want because you're not clear. So they feel, that you're a toxic boss, overly critical. And I know that we have people who have they come from the school of thought of, I want you to be successful, so I'm going to be harder on you. I'm going to be overly critical. And I think we are okay with criticism. We're okay with feedback as long as it's constructive and it can help me. It's actionable and it's measurable, right? It's not ambiguous. And it's, when you're talking to me, but being overly critical, belittling people, taking advantage of us, you're having a bad day, so all of us have to have a bad day, all of that kind of foolishness. Leaders who are arrogant. And I know we have to manage, right, some of this language. So what is arrogance versus confidence? I think, when someone is confident, they want to make you feel confident too. But arrogance, they might also fall into a category of belittling. And then people who have a lack of empathy, who are not socially or emotionally aware of the fact that maybe there's something going on with you that you haven't communicated that's impacting how you work or getting your work done. And I think leaders have to be empathetic. I was talking to someone this week about that, and he was sharing how a lot of people come to him, share their stories or what's going on with them, and he can get them to open up. And I think that's a combination of strong emotional intelligence, the fact that people trust him, and being trustworthy in the workplace is invaluable. And then, but also his ability to connect. And people see that as a value add so that they can do that. But really it's, and that leads to us being great leaders. Because when we show these toxic behaviors, it completely impacts employee morale, right? We have lower employee morale, you experience high turnover. Even in high performing, deadline driven, very talented organizations, you can experience high turnover because the culture is toxic, right? We allow people to mistreat others for the sake of productivity. And what that actually does is decrease productivity, because if I'm dealing with feeling like I work at a toxic workplace, the time it takes for me to get myself mentally prepared to come work with you takes away from my productivity. The interruptions throughout the day impact my productivity. And so again, we say about 50% of Americans, according to Gallup, are either workers who have reported experiencing a toxic boss, or they observed someone under the authority of a toxic boss. And then we have these indirect impacts, right? The company brand, you as a leader are impacted by this indirect sort of thing, right? So if the word is out, and I'll use a particular app. If we go to Fishbowl, if any of you are familiar with the app Fishbowl, it is an app where it's primarily used by people in consulting areas that work for large consulting firms, public accounting firms. And so if you go out there, you can read about the toxic experiences people have in the workplace. And so that's an indirect impact on your company, right? People work for your organization. They're on here and they're co-signing the experiences they have in your company culture. And now with remote work, you would think people could be safe from a toxic leader, a toxic boss. Now it does put a distance between you and toxic leadership, right? Because you don't have to walk past them in the hall. They're not coming up to your desk. But with us coming back into the workplace, there are, more opportunities for us to be interacting with toxic bosses. And this is why I'm here to solve this. But what we found, and even in remote work, people are still having to deal with this, even with the buffer between employees through a social distance kind of work environment, through remote work. Those moments when they do interact, it does create more breakdowns and the possibilities for misunderstandings that happen in communication, both written and on Teams, Zoom, Google Meets, wherever you're doing your virtual meetings, that can go unaddressed, right? So it's easy for me to ignore you and pretend like, it didn't happen. but I'm still in this experience with you. And then I think the last thing when we think about a toxic boss and the toxic culture is really how do we address these issues? And so when we think about topics and tips and ideas for this particular episode, and we're talking about how to create a psychologically safe culture, I want to give you a couple of things to consider. First one is building a foundation of trust. Right? In order to have a psychologically safe workplace, there has to be a high level and high degree of trust at work. Right? And so you have to explore trust as being the cornerstone of psychological safety, because psychological safety means, and let me give you the definition of that. Psychological safety, according to scholars and leaders in this space, and Amy Emerson is one, and she was at Harvard Business at Harvard, and one of the things that she defines psychological safety is a place where you can work or feel, or a team that you feel free from direct interpersonal threat of your being or losing your job because you've made a mistake, admit an error. You can have honest and open discourse. So I can disagree with you. You're my boss. You're a senior leader. You're a partner. You're the CFO. You're the chief accounting officer. You're the director of human resources. And I can say, oh, I disagree with what you just said. And we can have a dialogue about it. Open, honest, direct communication. And I never feel as if I am in jeopardy of losing my job because I'm challenging you or the status quo. So that's a long definition. Psychological safety means I trust that you have my well-being top of mind, and that I can be open and honest and direct, and I can even disagree, and I will not lose my job. And so the cornerstone of that is trust. It's cultivating strategies within your organizations where team members feel that they can speak up and they can trust you. And trust is influenced at every level within the organization. Psychological safety is also about being open and transparent in your communication style. And I love direct, open, and honest communication, right? We have channels for fostering psychological safety, and we don't have to hide necessarily behind email. When we're on a team, we look at questioning and challenging as a way to get us to the best solution. So if I challenge you, if I disagree with you, or if I present an alternative idea, it's only because I know that there is going to be something else better on the end of this once we're done. The other tip for building a psychologically safe workplace and untoxifying your leadership style is active listening. How many of you listen, but you're thinking about what you're going to say next? I do it. We all do it. We have to practice not talking. I always say, put myself on mute. Sometimes when I'm listening to someone and I'm talking to them on the phone, or we're in a dialogue in a virtual meeting app like Zoom or Teams, I will keep myself on mute so that I don't interrupt. I don't unintentionally overtalk, because I'm constantly thinking. And I know that my thinking style is also a speaking style of thinking. So I have to shut myself off. And we have to also do that when we're in person with people, right? We want to listen, fully hear exactly what they say, so that we don't bring any biases or any unintentional meanings to things that we hear, because we're in this constant thinking and always thinking we know what they're going to say. So active listening. As leaders, we have to embrace being vulnerable, admitting mistakes in front of our teams. You know what? Y'all, I screwed up. I was wrong. I'm moving too fast. Let's take a step back. Some of you knew I was going down the wrong trail, and you should have spoke up. Feel free to speak up. I know a lot, but I don't know everything, right? That's a dialogue that we can have with our teams. We can embrace our being vulnerable around people. And if our leaders are not vulnerable from time to time, it impacts our ability to trust them and see them as human. And then it puts a lot of pressure on us to try to be perfect. When we're coaching leaders, we talk about vulnerability quite a bit. and how being vulnerable actually makes people want to share and talk with you more about their work product, and even sometimes about what's going on in their life where they need support. And so it's really important for us to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and transparent, and to admit mistakes and even challenges that we are having. A lot of people know that I care for one of my brothers, and I don't use it as an excuse, but sometimes it impacts, some of the things that I'm trying to do. And letting my clients and letting the folks on my team that work with me know, hey, this is happening right now. They step up. And as leaders, sometimes we need our teams to step up and cover us, from time to time. Creating a culture of giving constructive feedback. And when I think about constructive feedback, feedback has to be actionable. Just don't tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did right. And let's talk about maybe what went wrong, how I can ensure that that doesn't happen again. So it's actionable. And then how do we measure that? How can we measure the impact of a mistake that I may have made, or how I can be a better leader to others, or how I can serve clients better, or skills, and that constructive feedback culture, again, which is direct, open, and honest. But like I said, feedback should be actionable, it should be measurable, but most importantly, it should be given timely. I don't wait until the year-end feedback process, performance process, to tell me that I've been doing something that you don't like or that is wrong. And don't let me go 12 months, 6 months, and never tell me, right? So let's make sure our feedback is timely and it's given to everyone, right? So if you are a Black woman and you're managing white men, you have to give them feedback just the way you would anyone else, and vice versa, right? If a white professional giving feedback to someone else, it should be given the same way you would to someone that you might feel even more comfortable with. It should be measurable, actionable, and most importantly, timely. And then let's figure out, how do we manage mistakes positively, right? So creating a psychologically safe culture is also about how we manage mistakes, right? Like I said, doctors get to practice, attorneys, they practice and they make mistakes, and we pay them the big bucks to do it. And I think it's okay for us to remember that we are also practicing in our professions. We are doing the best work we have with the knowledge that we have right now. And so how do we manage mistakes in the workplace and on our teams? How do we talk about when something doesn't go the way we intended it? And do we do that in a frame of positivity so that we can fix things in a culture that doesn't bring down morale? If we miss a deadline, or if we find that we're falling behind on a deadline, do we beat each other up about it? Or do we say, you know what, next time we need to start this project sooner so that we're not in a rush? If something goes wrong, right, we talk through that so that we can understand the role in making mistakes is also the role of finding ways to learn within the process. So the last thing I want to share about how to start this journey in becoming a toxic-free boss, and being an untoxic boss and creating a psychologically safe culture, is continuous learning and growth. I think that is also the secret to retention. Providing your teams and your employees with numerous opportunities for them to learn things that will help them in their personal life and in their professional life. Right? Understanding how to foster a culture of continuous learning and growth contributes to psychological safety. Right? You can explore this with your team, asking them, what do you need? And you might find that they might need things like, I just need new ways to feel like I'm productive, how to manage my time better. I feel sometimes that it's so much chaos. Or how can we manage our meetings more effectively so that they don't have to last an hour? Can we do the same thing in 30 minutes? There's a new technology coming out. Instead of being afraid that artificial intelligence is going to put me out of work, I look at it as, it's going to make my work better. We're going to be faster, smarter. We can respond to our internal and external clients better. right? Not being afraid of changes in the workplace means there's going to be an elimination of the workforce. And so, continuous learning and growth can really help us. And so just to summarize, a few things to help you build and foster a culture of psychological safety in an environment where 50% of our workforce feels as if our bosses are toxic. We want to build a foundation of trust. We want that foundation of trust to be open and transparent communication that is filled with active listening. People are listening more than they are talking, especially leaders. I think every day you come to a meeting, you want to think about, how can I speak 10% less? We want to embrace being vulnerable as leaders, admitting our own challenges and our own mistakes, and giving constructive feedback as part of our culture that is both timely, measurable, and actionable. And then finally, creating a culture of continuous learning and growth. I have many other tips, and I'll be back next Friday. Again, this is Jeannine Brown at Everyday Lead. I am the founder and CEO. I'm an executive coach, and I help companies retain talent from intern to retirement who love what they do and the companies they work for, because we help companies create cultures that are psychologically safe so that employees of all kinds can thrive. Thank you for joining the UnToxic Boss podcast today. We are here and on a mission to help people stop being a jerk at work. We'll see you here again next week.